Critical Role's Mighty Nein Reunion brought back the multi-eyed demigod sea serpent that is Uk'otoa for a final showdown with the beloved cast of characters. And it is a hell of a fight, with a lot of really fun story and character moments. But it also shows that Matt Mercer and the folks that he works with really know how to create a fun, dynamic, epic-feeling boss battle. It's partly through build-up because Uk'otoa was this ever-present threat in the main campaign. But today we're not going to talk about that. Today we're going to talk about these really interesting and fun mechanics that they use to make this battle memorable. So without further ado, let's dig in. First off, let's take a look at Uk'otoa's mini because it is insanely cool. And also there's something really interesting about it. There are multiple sections of the monster. This isn't really something I've ever seen in like an official D&D book, at least not one for 5th edition. According to the rules, all creatures are just assigned a size, and that's how big of a square they take up, and they just kind of call that good. And in most cases that works fine. But for things like giant sea serpents, you kind of want a little more to it. And having multiple sections to the monster is a really interesting choice for a lot of different reasons. One of the questions that arises is what happens if multiple sections are caught in an AoE or area of effect ability or spell? Does that creature only take the damage once, or does it take it for every section that's caught in the blast? My first instinct is to say that no, it only takes the damage once. But apparently, Matt disagrees.
And he will fire a cone of cold across both of those sections of Uk'otoa.
Nice.
Nice. Now this is an interesting instance where multiple parts of the body can be damaged with AoE elements.
So that's 46 points of cold damage to both sections.
That is 92 points of cold damage.
Uk'otoa takes the damage every time one of the sections are caught inside an AoE, which makes those abilities extremely useful against him. If the players play smart and tactically and position things well, they can do double or even triple damage. At first, this felt like a really bad decision to me. But then I kind of thought about it a little more, and I actually have come around to Matt's way of thinking, at least for this fight. First off, from a design perspective, if you're worried about the players doing too much damage when they're hitting multiple sections at a time, just give your monster more hit points. Something I like about this choice is it rewards tactical positioning by the players. While it doesn't take that much extra thought to make sure your Cone of Cold hits 2 or 3 of the sections, it does feel really good when it happens. We're D&D players, we all like it when the click-clack rocks make big numbers, and dealing double or even triple damage is a great way to make those numbers go higher. Another reason I really like this idea is because of how it synergizes with a mechanic called Fury that we're going to talk about a little later in the video. Rewinding a little bit, there's another really fun aspect to having multiple sections to a boss monster. It creates a much more dynamic fight because each section is a little bit different. This gives a lot of characters, especially the melee characters, a couple different options when they're rushing into the fray. They can go and attack the head, they can attack the tail, or they can attack one of the mid sections. Each of those sections has a different type of attack. The tail has a tail attack, the body has a slam attack, and the head has a bite attack. The bite attack is the most dangerous, as it can do somewhere around 40 to 50 damage in one hit, and it's a combined piercing and poison damage that does it, and if it hits, it has the chance to swallow you. Unfortunately for us, nobody actually got swallowed in the fight, so we don't know what happens inside the belly of Uk'otoa, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that it follows similar mechanics to other creatures that can swallow you. For example, if you're swallowed by a kraken, you are blinded and you are restrained, and you take acid damage at the beginning of every turn that you're inside the kraken's stomach. And if the kraken takes 50 damage from inside in a single turn, then it has to make a constitution saving throw or vomit you up. I can't confirm that Uk'otoa has similar or the same mechanics, but I think it's a pretty safe bet. The slam attack does somewhere around 20 to 30 damage and can grapple the PCs. The tail attack is pretty similar to the slam attack, but instead of grappling people, it flings them away. It kind of pushes them 15 feet away. All of these attacks do decent damage, but I think the more interesting thing here is they're really playing with placement and mobility, as we can see with the multiple sections, because you can get grappled, you can get flung, you can get swallowed. There's all sorts of different things that can happen to you when this monster is attacking you. These mechanics are really encouraging movement and placement, which is a really big theme in this fight, and it goes a little further with the lair actions. The first lair action Uk'otoa uses is called Anger of the Storm, where his eyes grow brighter and there's sort of a sense of static electricity in the air. When he first uses it, what it does is something of a mystery, but it relates to that Fury mechanic I mentioned earlier, but we're not there yet, so we're going to move on to the next lair action.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and do Battering Winds for this one.
Sure.
I love it.
So all the winds get stronger and stronger around, and you feel the all the non-water terrain is considered difficult terrain right now. So it takes twice the movement to move through the air or above water.
The second lair action Ukatoa uses is called Battering Winds, and it affects everybody who is not underwater. First, everybody needs to make a strength save or be knocked prone. And second, all terrain that is not underwater becomes difficult terrain. I like how a lot of the mechanics kind of promote mobility and others just sort of shut you down, so you can't always get to where you want to go. So now let's take a look at Ukatoa's legendary actions. Ukatoa appears to have 2 legendary action options, at least that I caught. He can use a slam attack, which we've already covered, but it's useful to be able to do that in between other characters' turns. And he also has an ability called Control Minion, with which he can temporarily take control, if he fails a save, Ford, who is his former warlock.
You feel that cold creep once more. You're that dark shadow of the ocean swallows you, and you feel yourself, the bubbles leaving your lungs. You've been here before, and that dark but weirdly, awfully consoling voice of Ukatoa says, "I'll handle everything." You fly over onto the ship, land next to Jester, prone on the ground. Jester, you see Ford rush over to you, heroically, like land on the ground next to you.
Hi, Ford.
Turns to you, and his eyes are yellow slits.
But this doesn't appear to be a full dominate person, because he's only taking control of Ford for the duration of the legendary action. Ford seems to get all of his actions, he can take 2 attacks, but he doesn't continue to be controlled once the legendary action ends. Next, we're going to go over Ukatoa's special abilities, his actions that aren't just his main attacks. But before we get to that, I am a warlock of YouTube. My dark patron is the algorithm, and he demands that I ask for likes, comments, and subscriptions. I know it's annoying, but he makes me do it, otherwise he takes my Eldritch Blast away, and I don't want to give it up.
You see behind him one of the waves well up as he's going to go ahead and tidal wave across the ship. 250 feet long, gets the whole ship. 250 feet tall, this wave.
Oh, it doesn't even, I can't even avoid it.
Nope.
This appears to be a recharge ability, a lot like a dragon's breath weapon. Only in this case, it's manipulating water and turning it into a giant wave, as opposed to breathing an elemental damage type. This is essentially a large AoE damage and control ability. It does somewhere in the range of 30 to 50 damage, and it can knock people prone. This ability is effective and it's thematic, but maybe it's just me, but I don't really care that much for recharge abilities. For clarity's sake, a recharge ability is an ability that your monster gets and can use, but it can't use it again until you roll a certain number on a die. For example, a dragon's breath weapon you can use, and then you have to roll a 5 or a 6 on a d6 at the beginning of your next turn to be able to use it again. If you don't get it back, you'll just have to roll until you get it back. Now, I like these mechanics in theory because they are random, dangerous elements inside the encounter. The players have to keep the possibility of this happening in the back of their minds while they're fighting without knowing when it's going to come. But in practice, I find these abilities make the fight very swingy, and they add an additional unpredictable layer to balancing the encounter. But this particular recharge ability I like a little better than a dragon's breath weapon, because a breath weapon mostly just does damage, and it does an insane amount of damage. Like if a young red dragon were to open the fight with its breath weapon, and you almost always have to open the fight with your recharge ability because then you get it back sooner, and then gets the breath weapon back on the second turn, he can absolutely wipe a level 10 party. But Tidal Wave only does 30 to 50 damage, and this is for a level 17 party, so it's not really that big of a threat, but it is really effective because you can attack so many people and do a significant number of damage. So it's generally a better option than his multi-attack, but in certain situations the multi-attack is better. But if you get it back too many times in a row, it's not going to just wipe out the party. But that's Tidal Wave. Let's move on to the ability that I've kind of been teasing throughout the video, Fury. Fury is an ability that appears to charge over the course of the fight in certain circumstances. One of those circumstances is that lair action that we talked about earlier. Basically, it just charges Fury, but we don't really know how much it charges. The other way it charges is it takes damage. The more damage it takes, the more Fury it gets, which ties back to the multiple sections being able to be hit in the AoE. So while it's really, really cool to do like 90 plus damage by catching 3 sections in your Cone of Cold, it's also giving Ukitoa more and more Fury. I really, really like this mechanic. It's a little bit complicated, especially when you take everything about this boss fight into consideration, but I really like the idea of charge abilities. There's also a built-in mechanic that the players can take advantage of to reduce the amount of Fury Ukitoa is building. If they opt to attack one of Ukitoa's eyes directly, it is a higher AC, so a lower chance to hit, but hitting it does not build Fury. And I believe Matt says if they hit the eye, they can even diminish the amount of Fury that Ukitoa has. I'm really curious about the math and the specifics of this ability, but until Matt releases the Ukitoa stat block, we won't really know for sure. And once Ukitoa reaches a certain threshold of Fury, he unleashes an attack that hits basically everybody, and a bunch of lightning bolts come down from the sky.
The eyes flare the brightest you've seen them, and they flare to a bright yellow, almost a white coloration before you feel the electricity in the air. 6 bolts of lightning strike down from the sky.
Everybody makes dexterity saving throws or takes a bunch of damage. Now, the one thing I don't really like about this specific ability is it doesn't do enough damage in my opinion. They did like 18 damage the one time Matt got to use it, and I don't know if he just rolled low or if he designed it with lower damage in mind, but in my opinion, this should do a lot more damage than that. Because the way I see this ability is it's sort of a natural building of tension throughout the fight. It provides sort of a structure to the battle. With recharge ability, you never really know when that big attack is going to happen, and that can add sort of an element of fear, but I really like the slow build. It gives like a story narrative structure to the fight. You get to do a little bit of foreshadowing by saying the eyes are glowing brighter and brighter and brighter until finally the lightning unleashes, and I think that should be a pretty devastating attack. It's sort of the climax to the fight, aside from the party getting the final blow, of course. And while I get that this doesn't take an action to use and probably should therefore do less damage, Ukitoa also took hundreds of points of damage to get to this point, so I think it's fair to unleash it a little bit more. But regardless, I really like this mechanic, and I'm probably going to politely steal it for my next boss fight. Overall, Ukitoa's monster design makes for a really interesting boss fight. It promotes mobility and makes sure that the battlefield is dynamic, while also building tension with the recharge and charge mechanics. Once again, this proves that Matt Mercer is a really great DM that we can all learn a lot from. I made a video about what I learned from him a little while ago. You can click on the video on the screen if you want to watch that. I want to take a moment to shout out my members. Thank you so much to Viva Fox and my mom, my literal mom. Thank you. If you found this video useful or inspiring or entertaining, I would really appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed to my channel. And if you really liked it, you could become a channel member. You can get some cool perks like seeing videos a couple days early. Thank you so much for watching.